Hello and welcome back to Perspectives, bringing you our daily dose of news and views covering the topics we hope are relevant to you. Well, today we're going to be looking at shocking revelations by a former CIA agent over India killing Sikhs, Nikhil Gupta's first court appearance, and how divisive politics in the US is hitting minorities. And a London auction house faces outrage over the sale of sacred Sikh scriptures from a private collection. So joining me today for Perspectives, as always, is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and welcome again to our amazing audience.
And together we'll be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And of course, as usual, we'll take a look at a large batch of your wonderful comments and we'll be answering some of your questions raised in those with our own thoughts and perspectives. So sit back, relax, and to kick us off as always, James, what have you got to kick us off with today?
Well, Angus, I thought that it would be a great time to discuss the US elections that will be happening in November in light of the recent debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And I would go as far as to say the non-debate. I'm just going to share up some talking points here. And with this, we'll keep in mind that we will discuss at another point the Biden side of the debate. So don't feel like we're just picking on Trump here. We're going to dissect both sides at one point or another. So it will be balanced out. But I just want to bring up some of the concerns that I have, and it's with politics in the U.S. And as we start here, the Statue of Liberty is just such an icon for America. And on that, you see a poem by Emmy Lazarus from 1883, and The New Colossus is the name of the poem. Most people know the lines of it that in part reads, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send those, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." And most people know the first part of that, and that is to bring together all of the people arriving at the ports in the U.S. from overseas, whether it was from India, whether it was from Ireland and Scotland, England, it didn't matter. But what I wanted to bring up is just a couple of things that I feel are bringing some divisiveness within the U.S. and inviting a more split and angered audience in terms of the election. So I really encourage youth to get out and have their voices heard. Now, some of the things in the debate that caught my attention was the false claims that the only jobs Biden was creating were for immigrants and for non-Americans. And when these numbers come out, they're talking about born American. They're not talking about people who have gained citizenship in terms of the way that they look at those numbers, which I think skews things quite a bit. But regardless, he claimed that a lot of the jobs were being geared towards immigrants and not Americans, which was not true. Now, keeping in mind that the numbers that he put forward, claiming that he had a better job record and employment record than Biden, it's one of those things that is very hard to decipher because of the worldwide events and the fact that many employers just shut down or staff were working from home and reduced numbers. So it's really unfair to judge those numbers from one administration to another. So that's something important as well. But the number of immigrants who have entered the U.S. was a concern, to exaggerate the numbers to probably a threefold amount at 18 to 20 million, and claiming that they're coming from prisons and mental institutions, I think was a mistake to state such a fact that is not proven, and there is no truth to that claim. Now, that only goes to people that don't understand the concept of fact-checking or following up on information themselves, and it creates a divide and an anger towards all immigrants and citizens who don't look, let's just call it as it is, that are not white. There's anger and hatred from the redneck audience towards that, and they're not getting the grasp of what politicians are trying to get out there because it's not spoken so eloquently. So these are just some of the few points, and I'm not going to go through them all that I've got on the screen here because I want to just make sure that we get through it. But one more point I'm going to put up is about immigrants crossing the borders illegally from the from Mexico into the U.S., and that southern border is the most dangerous place in the world. I don't believe that. It is not fact. And the fact that they are playing that, it's not only Mexicans crossing that border, it's people from all over the globe who find that it is easier to cross the border from Mexico into the U.S. than it is from Canada into the U.S. Not to mention the typical weather in Canada. They don't want to be stuck in a Canadian winter. So again, it's not a fair statement to make, and it only creates more divide and more distrust between the citizens of the U.S. Now, on the other side, I will touch on one important fact when it comes to Joe Biden. I was quite concerned at the end of the debate, not only throughout when he was looking lost or just totally out of place or not even there. I really felt that there was a big condescending moment between his wife, Jill Biden, and Joe Biden in the way that she congratulated him for answering all of the questions. It was almost like she was talking to a third grader for completing their math test on time. So both sides, I think that they need to figure out the next debate and try to bring more of the issues into the debate as opposed to arguing over golf scores. So I think that another point, once again, to reiterate, is that over the decades, the youth of the day have always felt disenfranchised and that the ears were not falling to their favor and hearing what they have to say. I think that this is an opportunity, not only in the US, but in the UK, in Canada, in upcoming elections, to really have your voices heard and to bring people back to the point of togetherness, inclusion, acceptance, and tolerance. So with that, Angus, I'm going to send it back to you in the studio in London.
Yeah, it's fascinating actually how politics is so reflected either side of the Atlantic, because so many of these same arguments we have in the UK. Now, the US and the UK are both extremely multicultural societies, and this has created problems, it's created very positive things, but what it's meant is that our politicians either side of the Atlantic have really managed to leverage these situations to their advantage in many different ways, and in fact in completely opposing ways. And it's very interesting that Trump and his party, the Republicans, have the politicians particularly are playing on this fear of immigration, and we have that the same in the UK, that the right wing play on this fear of immigration, but it's not ill-founded. It is not without reason, because, and this is where again the left and both sides of the party lines here are equally at fault in unfairly using the arguments. And I've got to be careful of my language here because it's such a sensitive subject, but there's a real there's a confusion, a deliberate confusion in politics, and I think this happens both sides of the Atlantic, between racism and anti-immigration, and it's particularly important here in the UK, and I think it is in the US, where we have an awful lot of immigration and illegal immigration into the UK, as indeed they have in the US. And the left wing, when the right wing stands up and say, look, we cannot have so much immigration, particularly in the UK. We are a very small country physically. We don't have the space, we don't have the infrastructure for so many immigrants. But when people stand up and say, enough, we've got to stop this, these high levels of uncontrolled immigration, they get called racist by the left wing. And this is a deliberate ploy, because actually it's not racism, it's literally it's anti-immigration. And interestingly, here in the UK, and I think this is the same in the US, is that many people standing up against immigration are from ethnic minorities themselves. They are anti-immigration because they understand this isn't a racist argument, it is an anti-immigration argument. In other words, we do not, here in the UK particularly, we don't have the room to cope with these people. And in the US, I think that same argument, or slightly a slight variation of that argument runs, where I think there are many ethnic minorities who are very pro-Trump because they understand what he's trying to do. And the left wing also are being a bit mischievous here because they're saying it's racism, and actually it's not a racism. But I think what it all boils down to is it's politicians who are the divisive ones. We in our multicultural communities all get on very well. These divisions, generally speaking, do not exist unless they are deliberately driven by politicians. And this is so reflected in India. You know, the irony now that actually we have the same issues as India is having, where this Hindutva ideology is deliberately driving these wedges between the communities. And this is the evil that we on either side of the Atlantic and across in India need to fight against. It's this small minority of people who are driving the divisions between the minorities, who are using politics effectively to create these divisions where actually none exist before, James. So yeah, it's so fascinating to see how it sits on your side of the Atlantic and how it reflects on our side.
Absolutely, and we share a lot of the same issues, whether it's Canada, the US, and the UK. I mean, you know, when it comes to that argument, it's very similar all the way across. But again, it's not something new that politicians are doing. They've been doing it for decades and just trying to find polarizing topics to pit people against each other and to drive that divide that hopefully translates to votes for them.
That's exactly it. They're looking for votes. All it is about getting elected, and they are appealing to whichever parts of the community they need to appeal to get those votes. So it's politics, it's democracy, it has its goods and it had its bads. So, okay, let's move on to my first story. And this is getting very specific. This is a podcast interview, actually, on the Sean Ryan show that was broadcast a couple of weeks ago. And it's just been picked up, actually, by the wider community. This is an interview of a lady called Sarah Adams. She's a former US CIA agent. Her role was a targeting officer for the CIA. She's also a well-known author of a book about Libya, Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy. Now, this lady was a senior advisor for the US House of Representatives Select Committee on Libya. She was also behind the investigations over a very big terrorist attack that happened in Libya in 2012 against the US armed forces. She's also an expert in reducing security risks to US personnel serving overseas. But she's also one of the most knowledgeable individuals on terrorist threats around the world. Now, she's a social media influencer, yet again, one of these new influencers. But she has revealed in this podcast evidence that the Indian government are funding Taliban leaders they're funding their security. And the question is, why on earth would India be pouring money, cash, into the Taliban? Well, basically, it's because the Taliban, India, are trying to get the Taliban to act as these proxies to kill Kashmiri and Sikh militants, or as they call militants, or as they call terrorists, in Pakistan. And targets that have been identified and assassinated have been seen in Lahore and Karachi and other areas of Pakistan. So the question is, why? Why is India doing this? We all know why. We've reported on it many times. India is very keen to kill these high-profile figures who are fighting for both Khalistan and Kashmir independence. But why are the Taliban doing it? That is the bigger mystery. But she theorises that there are a lot of factions in Afghanistan. I experienced this firsthand. I've worked out in Afghanistan. And there are lots of these very powerful factions who are all muscling and shouldering against side by side for power. And the Taliban, who represent one particular faction, need money, resources, and they need friends, essentially, to fight against the other factions. So the belief is that it's in their interest to take this Indian money to go off and kill these other activists operating in Pakistan. But this does go back to a Guardian report, which we reported on a few months ago. The Guardian this is a British newspaper, also reported that raw agents were recruiting jihadists to kill Sikhs in Pakistan and indeed in the West. And The Guardian itself reported that India, and I'll quote here from one of their articles, Indian agents use social media to infiltrate networks of Islamic State and units connected to the Taliban, where they recruited and groomed Pakistani Islamist radicals to carry out hit jobs on Indian dissidents. And by Indian dissidents, of course, we're referring to Khalistani campaigners. And this campaign was linked to over 20 killings in the last 4 years. And every time these killings happened, they were reported in the media as being done by unknown gunmen. And this is a term that's become quite sensitive, because actually this term unknown gunman has been utilised by Hindutva people, online activists, who threatened Sikhs on social media by saying, you will be got at by, quote, unknown gunmen. And that's including to, here in the UK, I think, the Sikh press agency. And the senior press officer, Jasveer Singh, received one of these very threats by Hindutva saying, unknown gunmen will basically get at you. So yeah, it's this murder by proxy again that we refer to regularly. The Indian government are clearly paying proxies, in this case the Taliban in Afghanistan, to kill their political opponents, James. We've seen it in Canada. Again, they've been using organised crime. India are paying organised crime, allegedly, to kill their political opponents.
And it all comes down to the mighty dollar. It's these different groups that are trying to get financing and funding through different operations. And we've seen it in Russia as well, with troops and private mercenaries that they've sent into Ukraine. So it's an international issue that needs to definitely be addressed with these private militias and others that are being paid off to do these things.
Yeah, and I think, James, the 4 people who've been arrested in Canada for the Panoon, I beg your pardon, the Niger assassination, I think they're known low-level criminals, aren't they?
Several of them had previous interactions with law enforcement. One of them is in Ontario jail pending the outcome of other charges that involved the possession of a handgun and other things. So yeah, it's not the first time they've had issue with the individuals that were charged with the Nijar murder. Yeah,
it's all about plausible deniability, as always. They are outsourcing murder, state murder, to individuals, low level criminals who actually might not even know themselves who ultimately is paying them, just to give them plausible deniability. So when the court, the Indian government, can put their hands up and say, it wasn't us. And this is, I think, what they're so afraid of with the Gupta trial is, of course, is what will Nikhil Gupta reveal to the US agencies.
Yeah, and 3 out of 4 of the individuals in the Nijar case are barely out of their teens in terms of age. So, I mean, they're not very worldly, we'll say, in terms of, common sense.
Yeah, I think that says it all. That does indeed say it all. Okay, my second story. This is a funny little story, but it just shows, how careful you've got to be in the normal course of life. This is an auction house in London, Roseby's Auction House, and they put up for sale a whole batch of sacred Sikh scriptures that came out of a private collection, and these scriptures included several Angs, and Angs are what literally meaning limbs, and they are physical pages of the Guru Granth Sahib Ji. This is the sacred text, of course, for the Sikh community. And this batch included 6 large Angs from an 1850 Sarup, and I had to look up what Sarup meant. That actually literally means a physical copy of the Guru Granth Sahib Ji, or Bir apparently in Punjabi. 15 Angs from an early 20th century Sarup, and illustrated bifolio from a Sikh religious document containing the Gurbani, that's the words of the Guru. Now this collection obviously is a very, very sensitive collection of scriptures. And of course, when it became public that this was being sold at an auction house, it provoked outrage in the local community. And of course, emails went in and a petition was set up and it received 8,000 signatures saying this is an absolute outrage. This is our sacred text being sold out on the open market at an auction. You know, the disrespect. Now, unfortunately, of course, the auction house, who were ignorant of this, they didn't realise what an offence this would cause. And they did actually issue, in fact, the lady who was the head of Antiquities, Islamic and Indian Arts Department, Alice Bailey, she issued a public apology saying, "We apologise wholeheartedly for any offence caused." And of course, the listing has now been removed. But it illustrates the fact that, these scriptures are so significant to the community, but it was out of innocent ignorance that this auction house put them up for sale. Of course, they've learnt a very powerful lesson. And Sikhs in Law, this organisation who represents the community, particularly on legal matters, issued the following statement: "This isn't the first time such an incident has occurred, and we expect it will not be the last. They are in the process of working with Sikh academics to draft an educational document for auction houses as a source of reference for items related to the Sikh religion, and also a voluntary pledge document to not deal in items that comprise Sikh religious texts." And it's basically, they are putting together a document to send around to auction houses to educate them. This is all about it. Yes, there is anger, there is outrage, but these auction houses didn't know. It's a learning process, and this is where the Sikh community have a responsibility themselves to educate places like this, get the message out. These texts are sacred. You cannot disrespect them in such a manner. So again, it's highlighted how Western culture is learning lessons. We've a lot of these things, a lot of these lessons to learn, and it's, you know, it's a slow process, and every time that the West makes a mistake, they are corrected by the community, and rightly so. And hopefully, it's a process of learning and education, James, and I'm sure it's the same in Canada.
Absolutely. It reminds me of back around 2014 when Bob Dylan, I believe it was, not the musician, spelled differently, Canadian Indian billionaire who had purchased, I believe that's who it was, that purchased a sacred Sikh sword from back in the late 1800s. And, he was going to be a real custodian of it, as opposed to the other 400 people that were bidding from around the world on that object.
Yeah, interesting. It's an interesting comparison, actually, because Christianity, we have our Bible, but if a Bible came up for sale, nobody would, there'd be no fuss about it. And I think it's that culture that has created this mistake that I think from a Christian, as a majority Christian country, the UK didn't understand the significance of the value of the scriptures and how important those scriptures are to the Sikh community, physically, how important they are, and how they have to be handled and dealt with the utmost respect. Whereas Christianity is actually quite different. In the sacred text of Christianity, the Bible, is not treated physically with so much respect. The words are, but it's not physically. It's treated in a very different manner. So again, it's cultural differences, and it's all part of the learning process. Okay, my final story.
It's nice to see that it worked out in the right favor.
Yeah, absolutely. So the final story, just a very quick one, just to report that Nikhil Gupta over the weekend, this gentleman who has been charged with the assassination plot on Gurpatwant Singh Pannoon, the head of Sikhs for Justice in New York, he had his first court appearance in Manhattan in New York over the weekend, and there was quite a gathering apparently of Sikhs. The community got together to greet him at the court, and apparently the word on the street is that over his following court appearances, I think there will be large crowds of Sikhs gathering to make sure that their voices are heard, and that those inside the courthouse are in no doubt as to the feelings of the Sikh community, as indeed they've been collecting in Canada for all these events, James.
Yeah, that's exactly true. And it doesn't matter where we are, whether we're in the UK, Canada, the US, we're all sharing the same principles and the same issues. So.
Okay, let's move on to our next section. The comments, these wonderful comments that we are receiving from you guys out there in our audience. So we did an interview at the end of last week with Dr. Gurinder Grewal. It was a fascinating interview actually, and it was about the caste system, and it went into great detail about the history, or certainly the recent history of the caste system, certainly across the 20th century, which has got us and led us to where we are today. And a lot of interesting information came out in this interview. So we received a lot of comments on this, so thank you for those comments. The first one I wanted to cover was by Jasleen JJJS, who said, great informative post, thank you, and thank you for the comment. Just when you think Hindutva Brahmanistic ideology can't stoop any lower, it slips further down. Pissing on a child, even animals won't do that. If you watch that podcast, if you watch that interview, I showed a video of a Brahmin, an upper caste, urinating on a Dalit, a child from the lowest caste. And it is absolute, and I say even in the podcast, I was horrified, and I repeat this over and over again. It is horrific, this video, that a human being can stand there urinating on a child because he's from a lower caste. I mean, it's an insult to animals to say even an animal would do this. The behaviour was disgusting, and there's just not enough words in the English language to describe this. But this is the caste system. This is how it works. This is it. Writ large, this is the reality of the caste system. It is evil on every level, and I will criticise it every day. And it's so fundamental to the Hindu religion. It's shocking. Now, India, to its credit, is trying to legislate against the caste system. They are trying to stop it. But as is second, and I'll read out Harjinder Baraj's comment, or I'll paraphrase it. The caste system is in the Hindu psyche. It will not disappear by making laws. Every Hindu who goes to the temple, they bow down to the caste system, the Varna. He, of course, lists out evidence to support this. It is the caste system is written into the fundamental elements of Hinduism, as far as I understand. It's a terrible thing, and if you watch this podcast, you'll see how it has infiltrated not just India infiltrated over the last 3,000 years. It's been a fundamental part of India for 3,000 years or more. But it's still very much there, and it is spreading to the diaspora. It's spreading to the Indian diaspora in the US, and of course in Canada, and to some extent here in the UK. So James, this is something that we don't cover very often. But again, but when we do cover it, we have mentioned that it is spreading to the diaspora. It is being seen in Canada. It is being seen in the US. It's something that we from the West must not tolerate.
Absolutely. And for those who are unfamiliar with the caste system, if you go back to about this time last year on the channel, you'll find a video that I did that went into great depth about the caste system and gave a great explanation so you can understand it more.
Yeah, and the British, I mean, we've got to be slightly careful here because we do have a class system. Which still exists. It's broken down to some degree. It's obviously not as bad as it was, let's say, 200 years ago. We do have a class system, but our class system is very different. It is not a caste system. We have an aristocracy, and we have a working class and the middle class in between. That's more of a social structure rather than a more rigid structure like it is in India. But certainly you don't get the behaviour treating lower class here in the UK. The lower class are not treated, okay, there are differences, but if the lower classes are ever treated in any bad way, it's certainly never in any manner like this. I mean, that would be a criminal offence if nothing else. It's called out. If any behaviour, any snobbish behaviour as we call it, between our class system ever occurs, it is called out, and it's called out very loudly. So yeah. But thank you for these comments, and do watch that podcast. You will be horrified by some of the things that come out. And again, on that same podcast, Harbinder Sandhu mentioned, I'm still at a loss of understanding as to why Dr. Ambedkar agreed to put Jains, Buddhists and Sikhs to be treated as Hindus under the Indian constitution. whereas he converted to Buddhism, to shackles of centuries of oppression under the Varna, under the caste system. Yeah, this goes into great detail. I won't go into too much detail about this. Do watch the podcast to understand what this explains. But the Constitution, we'll be talking to a constitutional expert. I think sometime in the next week or two we'll have an interview with a constitutional expert. But yeah, why did the Sikhs... no, they didn't sign the Constitution. They refused to sign the Constitution. But why did this constitution go through? And it was allowed to go through where Sikhs, amongst others, were classed as Hindus. And the British signed off on this, I think, essentially just to get out of India as quickly as possible. But the constitution was signed where it put Sikhs and Jains and Buddhists under Hindus. And that is clearly not the case. They are not. Sikhs, as we've argued many times, are not Hindus in any way, shape or form, despite what Hindutva try to argue otherwise. It is not the case. And there is enough proof out there to prove otherwise. And the question is, why did Dr. Ambedkar convert to Buddhism? Yeah, he actually tried to convert to Sikhism. This Dr. Ambedkar is the guy who represented the Dalits, the lower class, in the negotiations, and failed spectacularly. He eventually converted to Buddhism. He tried to convert to Sikhism, but the Hindus, Mahatma Gandhi, said no, we're not letting you convert to Sikhism, because that way all the Dalits, the lower caste, will convert to Sikhs. And they were afraid of that. They were terrified of all the Dalits, the lower caste, converting to Sikhism, to Sikhi, because of what that would mean. It would mean there would be millions of lower caste Indians who would join the ranks of the Sikhs, and thus become a much more powerful lobby against the Hindu majority. Sorry, James, I don't know if you've got anything you'd like to contribute on that one. It was a very specific
Yeah, I
comment.
just lost you for a moment there, Angus. My apologies. But yeah, it's all about the history and bringing everything to a new modern age. And I think that's where the next generation has such an opportunity to make substantial changes.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. We talk about generations quite a lot, actually, and particularly how the young generation have a responsibility in many ways to carry on not just the heritage and culture, but to understand what the older generations are telling them, the lessons. And casteism, every generation has the ability to change things. Every next generation has this ability, and this is how culture evolves and changes. So the appeal to the younger generation is they must understand the evils, the downsides to things like casteism, and these young generations have the ability. It is in their power, it is in their remit to be able to change things. And this is why things do evolve, because the young generations then do change things for the better. So the hope is the younger generations of Hindus will recognise casteism for what it is, and they will change things. They will slowly move society away from that terrible, terrible structure. Okay, translation. Thank you, Veli307, for this. Translation is not working.
Description of what you...
Sorry, James.
Oh, go ahead. I was just saying that, just the descriptions of what happens that's deemed acceptable by some people just never ceases to amaze me or disgust me.
Yeah. Okay, last comment on this one from Veli307. Translation isn't working very good. Instead of Sikh, it shows as Sikh, S-I-C-K, and Greywell as Growell. Yeah, we mentioned this before. Apologies, we do not control the subtitles. They are artificially intelligence generated. YouTube generates them. And again, back to the Sikh discussion. In the UK, we describe them, the community, as Sikhs, and they describe themselves as Sikhs, S-I-K-H's. In the US, the Sikh community describes itself as a Sikh community, S-I-K-H again, but the subtitles, the AI only understands it as S-I-C-K. So we'll just have to keep repeating this. Apologies to our audience. If you're only watching the subtitles, that's why. We have no control over it. So we'll keep having to repeat this message, I'm sure. Okay, our last perspective show. User SG6WL1VS, whatever. I don't think the British should be blamed for not giving the Sikhs their land back. It was the Sikh leaders who played a very dumb role to trust Gandhi and Nehru. The British leaders wanted to be fair to the Sikhs as well, but stupid Sikh leaders overtrusted Hindus and regretted later on. Yeah, you got to. This brings back partition. The two representatives of the Sikh community refused to sign the constitution. They were presented by the Brahmins, essentially, who were controlling everything. They were presented with what we call a fait accompli. They were presented with, here's how it is, sign it, or that's it. They had no choice, and so they refused to sign it. And the community at the time did not stand up more aggressively because they were promised. They were made promises by the Hindus, the Brahmins. Oh, don't worry, you sign this. Let's agree to partition as it is, and then we will give you your homeland. Punjab, you'll get your autonomy. You'll get your homeland. And what happened? Of course, they were betrayed. And this word betrayed crops up every time the Sikh community, we look back over the history of the Sikh community, they are constantly betrayed over and over again because they trust. The Sikh community, one of their central tenets is they see everybody as equal. They trust people. Their natural default position is to trust people because they see the good in humanity. And of course, they are constantly betrayed. Their trust is betrayed. And this is exactly what happened in partition. They trusted what they were promised and they were betrayed. So yeah, it's very easy in retrospect to blame the Sikh leaders at the time, but they trusted and they were betrayed. It's a lesson, unfortunately, that keeps being learned, the Sikh community. They keep trusting and they keep being betrayed. But don't, never be ashamed of trusting. It's, again, it comes back to Sikhi. It's a humanity thing. It's not a bad thing to trust. Unfortunately, it's a bad thing to betray, James. It comes back to human nature as always, doesn't it?
It does.
D. Harminder Sekon, one of our regular contributors, says, you will be surprised to know that the Indian government has banned your YouTube channel in India. No, we're not surprised. We know it. I live in India-occupied Punjab. I have to change my YouTube location, so you use a VPN so that you can watch us. This is also the reason why there are few videos on a video. If we know we're blocked in India. If everybody in India could watch us, our views would be in the, if not the hundreds of thousands, possibly even in the millions. But we have relatively few views because we are blocked in the Punjab, and it's only those who have access to VPNs like yourself who can watch us and hear the truth. And this is, again, we talk about it regularly. Indian media is so partisan, it's so prejudiced and biased. They don't tell the truth. They only they only sell one side of the narrative. They give the government line. They're not allowed to say what we're saying. Indians in the Punjab particularly never hear the truth unless they have a VPN. So James, it's freedom of speech. We take it for granted in the West. In the Punjab, they only hear one side of the narrative, don't they?
Absolutely, and it's no different than when I was covering the front lines in Ukraine. I had my viewers go skyrocketing from Moscow, so we can only guess who those viewers were. While at the same time, my channels were blocked, so nobody else could watch it in Russia. So it's just, it's not freedom of the press everywhere.
Yeah, it's true. And if we changed our whole agenda, if we became a pro-Narendra Modi, pro-Hindutva channel, we'd be in the millions now. We'd be laughing all the way to the bank. But we're not. We are here to get the message across of the Sikh community, the voice of the Sikh community, which is banned in Punjab. So we hope we're doing a good job for that. So our final comment from Bharat India. Dear Angus, not sure if it's the pattern directed for the show, but James is not speaking a lot on the show. I guess you should be putting in more words to bring more width into the perspectives as he's on the other side of the Atlantic. Yes, absolutely. Fair point. This actually is partly or probably even mainly my fault for two reasons. One, because when I start ranting, I find it very hard to stop because I'm very passionate about what we talk about. And poor James then struggles to get a word in edgeways. The second actually is a more practical reason. And this is because we actually have to try and squeeze our show into 28 minutes. And we're already way over time. So we have to rush through our topics. And of course, when we discuss our topics, if I start talking, and then if James says as much as I say, we'll suddenly be into 2 hours. So it's actually a practical issue that we have to rush through stories. And sometimes I just don't even have time to hand over to James. But this show, I hope you have noticed, we have allowed James to come out of his box a little bit more and speak a little bit more, James. I hope you're appreciating that.
Yeah, And we will continue to work on that as we move forward. So, it's a balancing act. And if you look down at your clock on your screen as you're watching this show, you'll see we're way over time again.
Indeed. In fact, we decided, so yeah, James and I said at the beginning of the show, before we came on air, we said, well, let's just run it and see how it goes. Let's just see how long it does turn out. The problem we have as a production team is that we either reduce the number of stories that we show you, to then give James more time to speak. But the problem with that, of course, is then there's less in the show, there's less stories, and there is so much to report on a daily basis that we have to squeeze this in. Or we then just go on for hours, and of course, yeah, we lose audiences. We've seen this just from the statistics. If we do go on for an hour or more, then yeah, the audience drops off. So, it's a no-win situation, Mr. Barrett India. We will do our best, but yeah, we'll see how it goes. The point is noted. Thank you very much indeed for that. So, okay, those were your comments. So we'll rush into, well behind schedule, we'll rush into the final segment of the show. And James has for us a fascinating video that he's put together talking about the Sikh community in Canada and how they have contributed to the building of that very nation, James. James, what have you got for us?
Well, it is Canada Day, July the 1st, and that's when we celebrate our independence and Canada as a country. I thought, what an amazing day to share with you a video that celebrates all of the Sikh contributions to the building of our great nation and to send appreciation and love out to all of the Sikh Canadians throughout history and in the current day. So let's take a look.
Hey everyone! Today, in celebration of Canada Day, we are diving into an incredibly rich and inspiring part of Canadian history that often doesn't get the spotlight it deserves. That's right, we're talking about the profound impact of Sikhs on the development of modern Canada. Buckle up, history buffs, because this journey is packed with resilience, determination and triumph. The story begins in the early 1900s when the first wave of Sikh immigrants arrived in Canada. Most of them landed on the west coast, particularly in British Columbia. They faced numerous challenges, including harsh weather, unfamiliar terrain, and unfortunately, significant racial discrimination. Despite these obstacles, they laid down roots and began to make significant contributions to the Canadian fabric. One of the most notable contributions of early Sikh immigrants was in the lumber industry. They brought with them a wealth of experience and a strong work ethic that quickly made them indispensable in this labor-intensive sector. Many of the logging operations in British Columbia thrived due to the hard work and dedication of these pioneering Sikhs. This wasn't just about livelihood, it was about building a community and proving their worth in a new land. Fast forward to the mid-20th century, and Sikhs were making strides in politics and public service. Did you know that in 1947, the same year India gained independence, Sikh Canadians gained the right to vote in federal elections? This was a monumental shift, and it paved the way for Sikh representation in Canadian politics. Bhagat Singh Thind, though initially denied citizenship in the United States, became a symbol of perseverance. His struggle inspired many Sikhs in North America to fight for their rights. By the 1980s and 1990s, influential figures like Ujjal Dosanjh were emerging. Dosanjh not only became the first Indian-born Premier of British Columbia, but also served as a federal Member of Parliament and a Cabinet Minister. His achievements signified a broader acceptance and recognition of Sikh contributions to Canadian society. Today we also celebrate the amazing contributions of Canadian Member of Parliament, Jagmeet Singh, who also hold the position as leader of the NDP Federal Party. His steadfast commitment to improving the lives of every Canadian is inspiring and demonstrates the unlimited opportunities for all Canadians to achieve their dreams. But it's not just political arenas where Sikhs have left a mark. The entrepreneurial spirit is strong within the Sikh community. Names like Bob Singh Dillon, who became Canada's first Sikh billionaire, showcase the incredible business acumen and innovative spirit that Sikhs brought with them. He was also awarded Canada's top civilian honour, as he is a member of the prestigious Order of Canada. These success stories resonate across various fields, from real estate to technology, driving economic growth and fostering multiculturalism. The cultural impact of Sikhs in Canada is equally significant. Vaisakhi parades, which celebrate the Sikh New Year and the formation of the Khalsa, have become major events drawing diverse crowds. The Sikh community's commitment to seva or selfless service is evident in their numerous charitable efforts, from running food banks to offering free meals through langar. This spirit of giving back enriches the Canadian social landscape and promotes inclusivity. On the global stage, Sikh Canadians have also made their mark. Harjit Sajjan, a former Canadian Minister of National Defence, is a prime example. His service in both the military and in politics is a testament to the significant roles that Sikh Canadians play in shaping not just Canada, but the world. So there you have it, folks. From early settlers enduring hardships to modern trailblazers breaking barriers, the Sikh community has been instrumental in building and shaping modern Canada. Their story is one of resilience, innovation, and unwavering dedication to their new homeland. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more fascinating historical insights. Thank you to all Sikhs for your dedication and commitment to our shared nation. Best wishes go out to every Canadian on this Canada Day, from Angus, James, and everyone at Satluj TV. Remember to share your images of how you spent Canada Day, and we may feature a few in the next episode.
And on that note, I wish everyone a very, very happy Canada Day. Stay safe, have fun. And with that, back to you in the studio in London, Angus.
Thank you, James. An inspiring video. But there you have it. That was Perspectives. Please don't forget to keep those comments coming in. We're receiving some great comments and we do love to discuss them, as you know. So do keep them coming in. And don't forget, if you'd like to record a short video message on anything relevant, do it. Send it in. We'd love to hear from you and what you've got to say. And don't forget, you can message us directly at message@satludgetv.com on any news items that you'd like to highlight that we should know about. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching Perspectives. It's goodbye from me and it's goodbye from James.
Thank you for watching. Stay safe.
You have been watching Perspectives. We'll see you next time.